afternoon to all of you. As March, we celebrate it as a Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month. So today we'll be doing a webinar on cerebral palsy, early features, associated problems, and treatment with Dr. Rajni Farmania, who is a consultant pediatric neurology, BL Kapoor Super Specialty Hospital, New Delhi. She has done her MD Pediatrics from SMS College and Pediatric Neurology from AIMS New Delhi. She has worked at AIMS Post MD for 3 years and DM Pediatric Neurology for 3 years.
So good afternoon, everybody. So it's my pleasure to be here at the platform of Moms Believe to be just sharing my some views on cerebral palsy. And I'll be, since Gadia has already told that this is a cerebral palsy awareness month, and we want to make our parents more empowered and more educated about this problem so that we can help our children better. So let's go and start. So yeah, March is a cerebral palsy awareness month, and there are basically two things on which I'll be speaking about, which I want everybody of us here to understand. So what is that is, yeah. So these are two things. One thing is early identification and intervention, and the second one is physical therapy is first therapy and must therapy. So all the fancy and new therapies, yes, they are there and they are upcoming and new experiments are being done, but physical therapy is must and it will not beat the other things. All the other things are in addition to physical therapy. That is one thing which I want to actually make everybody of us here aware about it. uh, So my focus in this talk will be on cerebral palsy and its type so that we understand that what this disease is. Next will be early markers for identification, common associated problems, and basics of management in cerebral palsy. I will not speak about the new advances or newer therapies that we can have one or two questions later. But yeah, the basic part of management and what is the holistic care in this group of population. So coming to the definition, cerebral palsy, cerebral means brain. A little word is brain, and palsy means a disability, physical disability. So cerebral palsy together means a disease of the brain where the child, due to which becomes, has certain limitations in physical capability. And the other thing is it is permanent but not progressive. So very important, these two terms are permanent and not progressive. So by medical definition, as we go, cerebral palsy describes a group of permanent disorders of movement and posture. So here it is movement, a proper posture of a child, appropriate posture which we attain, and a movement, a fixed kind of movement which we want to do is at a fix in this disease. It is permanent, it causes activity limitation, and it is non-progressive. With increasing age, it will not increase. The brain injury is not going to increase. It is going to stay back. The other thing is it happens due to the injury of the brain during the fetus, like within that 9 months when the mother is carrying the baby. And the other thing is when the child is very small, like less than 2 years of age, when the child already has an immature brain. During that time, if the brain has incurred any insult, that can be permanent and that can lead to any physical disability in the form of movement and posture, that is called cerebral palsy. So how common is cerebral palsy? If we compare the worldwide data and the India data, it's almost the same. In worldwide, out of 1,000 live births, around 1.5 to 4 children might have, depending upon the variable regions, they can have cerebral palsy. And India, approximately 3 per 1,000. And it is more in the urban areas compared to the rural background areas, because in urban areas there are medical facilities which are more advanced. So we have good nurseries, and that is how this spastic cerebral palsy and cerebral diplegia is increasing day by day in urban population. So population is more in the urban areas. So what about its types? There are different types of cerebral palsy, and that all depends on how we divide it. So this is one form of knowing the type of cerebral palsy depending upon the area of the brain involved. The first one, which is the most common, is spastic. Spastic is a medical term which means stiffness. If I convert this into a layman term, will be stiffness. In medical term, it will be spastic, and this is the most common because of the affection of the cerebrum of the brain. The second most common is dyskinetic. Dyskinetic means abnormal movement, abnormal tone, abnormal posture is more common in this kind of thing. Again, this will also be rigid, and this is also going to be stiff, but this is in a lesser proportion of cases. In both these types, the causes, the etiology is different, and which leads to affection of different parts of the brain. The third one is ataxic, that is 5 to 10%, in which the balance and coordination issues are there. So there are particular areas in the brain which has function differently. If cerebrum is involved, that causes more of spasticity. If deep gray matter, like deep inside the brain, there is a problem, it causes more of a posture and movement problem, that is dyskinetic. If the posterior part of the brain, the cerebellum is involved, then ataxic cerebral palsy. So different areas of the brain getting involved and different kind of physical features which we are able to see. Mixed combination is also we are able to see mixed combination also in these children. So what are the different types according to topography? If we see a child overall and the doctor assesses that these are the parts of the body which has hypertonia, that is increased tone, or decreased tone, we can divide as hemiplegia. Hemi means one side of the body. The first cartoon shows that this one is the normal part, this one is the affected part, that is hemiplegia. Diplegia means the body, the core of the body is okay, but hands and limbs, lower limbs are affected, and in which lower limb is more affected. Quadriplegia means overall, the core of the body, the central, the axial part, plus the appendicular system is also involved, that is quadriplegia. It can be asymmetric, like right is more than the left or left is more than the right. But yeah, the axial and the appendicular part both is involved. Ethetoid and dystonic are abnormal movement and posture kind of. And ataxic is again the coordination problem in which the child will have lot of balancing issues. So these is the another way of classifying the cerebral palsy. Very important of this is a functional classification. In any child of cerebral palsy, we should be knowing that what is the current functional ability of the child, and every visit, like every 3 monthly or 6 monthly as the child visits, we should be knowing that what is the physical capacity of the child. Functional classification, GM is gross motor functional classification system. It depends upon it has multiple levels like 1 to 5. The 5 is being the most severe, 1 being the best. One being like the child can walk indoor, outdoor, climb stairs, and do independent work with no need of any devices. In level 2, he is able to walk, but when he climbs the stair, he needs certain little support. So that is level 2, but he doesn't need any support in the form of assisted devices or any other person. He is a kind of self-independent with little support which is required. In level 3, the child can walk indoor and outdoor, but the child requires assisted medical devices. In level 4 and 5, these are the ones who need more of assistance, and you can see the person is there, additional person is there with assisted devices, and depending upon the variability, the level 5 is the most severe one. Now the question is here is why it is important to know so many types of cerebral palsy. Is it really important that we know that what is the type? Yes, because the medical planning, a doctor does a medical planning of the rehabilitation and the medical management, which depends upon the abnormal tone, the part of the body which is affected is dependent upon the type of the cerebral palsy. Even the associated problems like spastic quadriplegic child will have more of epilepsy, they will have more of cognitive issues, and they will have more of other sensory issues. So in that case, they will require more or a different kind of medical planning and rehabilitation, of course. Finally, the prognosis also depends upon the type of cerebral palsy. So knowing the type or classifying at the first go is very important. What about the timing of brain injury? When did my child incur this kind of injury, or when did it happen? And why did it happen? These are the two common questions which the parents ask. And the third thing is that is there any hope? Will my child do better? How will my child do? So that is called prognosis. That we'll discuss in later slides. Now, what about the timing of the brain injury? There are this we can divide in the three parts, like prior to birth, within that 9 months, that antenatal period. The second is the birth period, that is called the perinatal. Perinatal is the birth process and immediately after that birth, within that short time. Postnatal is after the birth, what is happening, that is a postnatal process. That postnatal can persist up to 1.5, 2 years till the child's brain is growing, and any injury occurring during that time is a postnatal injury. So what are the different causes in each thing we can see? First is prenatal, that is the most common. So here very important thing to know is that the prenatal, the first 9 months, when the child is still inside the mother's womb, that is the most important timing where the child can have the problem. Contrary to what the general population feels, that there is a lack of oxygen or other issues during that perinatal period. But most common is this perinatal component, in which the genetic disorder, the congenital malformations can be there. And other thing is maternal factors. If the mother has some kind of chronic disease like anemia, or she's on some medication for any disorder, that might affect the child. Any kind of toxins like smoking or alcohol, any infections are common in our country. So any kind of torch infections, that is toxoplasma, rubella, CMV. So these all infections, if the mother has been affected with this, then the child will also be affected. And other toxin can be radiation. So these are the prenatal factors. Perinatal is, of course, perinatal asphyxia is, that is hypoxia, that is less of oxygen. While that birth process is happening, the child is receiving less oxygen and the brain is not receiving enough. The second thing is prematurity. Any infections in that uh, immediate perinatal period, like chorioamnionitis, or mother has some kind of other infections. If the child has stroke, that is perinatal stroke, or intraventricular hemorrhage, any kind of sugar issues, usually the child who is IUGR can have a hypoglycemia, and then they can have multiple problems later. If the child has had prolonged neonatal ventilation for any reason, if the child suppose has a lung issues or any other issues, and the child has been ventilated for long time, then again the child might have episode of hypoxia. So that might lead to a developmental delay and later cerebral palsy. Next is postnatal factors. It is infection, hemorrhage, stroke, injury. Basically, any kind of injury which can lead to that which can affect that brain during that time, can lead to cerebral palsy in the later life. So, what are the typical and common features at any age? Like all the parent will be definitely tracking the milestones compared to the other SIP. When a child comes, the common complaint is delay in attainment of motor milestones, specifically when the child is not holding the head properly at a proper age, not able to sit properly, not able to walk properly by the age of 1 year. Compared to the other peer group members, the parents can recognize the issue and can come to a doctor. If the parent feel abnormal stiffness, they are not able to dress the child well because the child has lot of tone issues, then that's another problem. They usually seek a medical attention because of that. If the child has persistent abnormal posture, like the child is able to see only on one side, not on the other side, a particular kind of abnormal tone in the body, that is another issue that the parent can come. If there is a seizures, this is another indication the parent can come to the child, and abnormal head size. So these are the common features which a layman or a parent can understand and bring the child. But are there other features which everybody of us should know? That are there other common features or early features which can lead to a suspicion of this kind of disorder? So let's come to that. That what are the early signs of cerebral palsy? Neurobehavioral. So there are four important things in this neurobehavioral. Uh, One thing is excessive irritability. If a child between 0 to 3 months of age, or maybe 6 months, a child who's very small, is excessively irritable, usually what as a parent we take that the child will be irritable. Child, since the child is born, the sleep wake cycle is not attained, and child usually sleeps in the day, cries at the night. So we take it as a normal norm. But if the child is excessively irritable, inconsolable, the child is keeping on crying for 2 hours, 3 hours without any reason, then yes, that is a matter of concern if it stays persistently over some days. Next is poor sleep. The child, a newborn till the age of 3 months, and also the child will sleep for 18 to 20 hours a day. But the child is sleeping only for 10 to 12 hours, and most of the time when the child is awake, is not a happy child. The child is crying most of the time. That is another reason or another indication that the child has some issues and must visit a doctor. The another thing is difficulty to handle or cuddle. So here the thing is cuddling is an issue. When the child is crying, the mother tries to take the child on the lap or child to try to cuddle the child. The child is very angry, and here you can see that he makes himself stiff during that time. He doesn't want to get cuddled. That is another feature that there are some issues. Other thing is poor visual attention or searching eyes. See, as a newborn grows, in the newborn, the child can see only till 10 to 12 inches. A mother is carrying a baby, and this is the only distance the child can see and fixate as a at a focus. The child cannot see a very distant object. By the age of 3 months, the child has a distant vision and can also track the objects side to side and vertical also. From 6 weeks to 12 weeks is the maximum time when the vertical gaze also starts, and they can see till 180-degree. So if a 3-month-old child is not tracking, is not able to focus at a object particularly, and uh, or the child has just the wandering eyes, child is not able to fix. These are the hard signs, or these are the difficult signs which says that the child has some vision issues. So neurobehavioral issues, uh, so these are the neurobehavioral issues which suggest that there are some issues and the child needs some medical attention. Here, this is a normal one. The mother and the child has a good eye contact and they are happy and they are just playing. So this happy relationship is not there in children with cerebral palsy. Not in all cases, but yes, in some cases you can have these features. What are the other features? See, delay in attainment of milestones compared to other SIP or other children. This everybody of us knows. But other the other way around is, I mean, seeing the thing at the other angle is early attainment of other milestones. I have seen that certain parents usually boast that my child has started rolling over at 2 months or 3 months. So this is not possible. See, if the child has abnormal tonic labyrinthine reflex, that's a medical term. Usually the doctor will be able to check. If the child has abnormal postural reflexes or primitive reflexes, the child can have early rollover. Usually it comes at 5 months. If the child of 2 months or 3 months is rolling over, that's not normal. That's again an indication that the parent should see a doctor. Other thing is early head control. A child usually have a proper head control at 5 months, some partial kind of head control at 3 months. If a 2-month-old baby, if a parent feels the child has obvious had a proper head control and a neck control, and most of the time the head is retracted, that is abnormal. That means the child has abnormal spinal hypertonia, like a cord like feeling somebody is pulling from the back. That is abnormal. Early hand preference. Some of the parents will say that my child has left-handed preference. So there is some notion in the population that if the child is left-handed, the child will be more intelligent. So he works most of the time with the left hand. But that handedness comes between 2 to 3 years of age. If a child of 7 months is preferentially using only the left hand or the right hand and is not using the other hand, that means that the other hand is weak. That doesn't mean that the child is left-handed or right-handed. Handedness will appear after 1.5 years. In the majority of the cases, between 2 to 3 years, where you can say that the child is left-handed or right-handed. So early hand preference in less than 2-year-old child is abnormal. So gaining milestones early, we should see the child in suspicion, looking at the other features as well, not only just one feature, this feature, but yes, this can be a point of suspicion. The other thing is persistent fisting after 3 months. Usually this is a fist with a newborn forms. Until 3 months, this is normal. This is a cortical thumb. The thumb is inside, the finger is like this. If this persists after 3 months, or it is asymmetric, like one hand like this, but other hand is normal, it is open most of the time, then this is abnormal. This is again an indication that we should see a doctor. Now there are multiple slides later we have, which I have tried to explain on abnormal muscle tone. Floppiness is a medical term, which means that the tone of the body is low, which can be known in the general term as excessive looseness or floppiness, and in medically we say that the child has hypotonia. Ragdoll feel on ventral suspension. I think I have some diagrams on this. I'll explain that. So these are the three diagrams for abnormal muscle tone for hypotonia. In first thing, if a child, less than 6-month-old child, we hold like this and we feel that the child is just putting down a rag doll like, no tone. A child usually who is more than 4 weeks or 8 weeks will have a head up, will have a shoulder up when you keep the child on the ventral suspension. So ragdoll-like posture is hypotonic. If you take the child by the arm, the child slips down. Child doesn't have a tone and child doesn't kind of rest on your on taking the child on axilla. That is again hypotonia. And when you pull the child, the head is totally lagging behind. That is again after 4 weeks of age. If you feel this way, 4 weeks or 8 weeks, then this is abnormal muscle tone or hypotonia. Coming to the other end, that is stiffness or hypotonia, hypertonia. Hyper means increase in the tone of the body. That is perceived as stiffness. There are two kinds of stiffness which we see medically. One is spasticity and the other is rigidity. I don't want to tell you much of a medical part because it will be difficult for me to explain. But these are the certain postures which you see in your child or any other child. Then that's a matter of concern. One thing is seizuring. When you hang the child like this, you put the child on support by the axilla, there is a seizuring of the legs. That means the adductor muscles, the thigh muscle group has abnormal tone. That is why it is keeping like this cross leg kind of posture. The other thing is W sitting. When our muscles, hamstring muscles, the muscles on the back of the thigh is abnormal, the child will have, or a weakness, the child will attain mostly this kind of sitting. That is W sitting. W sitting can be normal in a child who is like less than 18 months if all the other things are normal. A single feature in isolation does not implicate that the child has cerebral palsy, but they can give a clue. Suppose a normal child, a normal developing child who is able to walk, he is able to speak, and everything is normal, and sits in the W position preferentially at the age of 12 months, that is normal. So in isolation, nothing is leading to a diagnosis, but it has to be seen holistically for an individual child. Cortical thing which I was telling about, that the thumb is inside and fingers are like this. So these are the three diagrams. The seizuring I have explained, arching on the back, W sitting. If there is difficulty in changing diaper, see, while we change the diaper, you have to put the thighs apart. And if you are not able to do so, if there is abnormal stiffness, the thighs will always be like this. That means you have difficulty in changing the diapers. That is another indication that there is some issue. Cortical thumb, bottom shuffler. If the child is sitting like this and child just shuffles on the butt, that is a bottom shuffler. Paucity of the general body movements. When we lay the child on the bed, normal infant will just throw the hands or legs, or will have multiple wide repertoire of movement. If that is not there, or it is asymmetric, like one part of the body is moving but other part is not moving, that means the child has some abnormal body movements. That is another indication. If the child has abnormal extension or flexion of toe, or a commando crawl or a toe walking. So first thing is, let us see some videos. Here in this video, the head is small and there is already a sutural overriding. So that's another indication that there is some issues with the child. And you can see that how the tone is. The movement in general is low. The child is 6 months old and child is moving very less. And even the movements are very stiff. So that means child will have some issue. In the other second one, this 5-month-old baby, you have taken the child, you're trying to just cuddle the child like this, but child is moving on the back side, like somebody has a cord like thing on the head and somebody is pulling from the back. This is spinal muscle hypertonia. And most of the time, if you make the child lie down on the bed, you'll feel that the child has attained a head control, but this is a false perception because of the abnormal tone of the body. The third video, the child is mostly is a 2.5-year-old child and has a hamstring weakness, and she's just shuffling on the floor, kind of commando crawl. Basically, she's just dragging her legs. She's moving the body forward and then dragging the legs, as commandos do on the battlefield. Next, another is this is toe walking, like standing in the toe or most of the time walking on the toe. That is another indication of abnormal tone. Striatal toe, that is left striatal toe, is the toe, great toe is abnormally extended. There is a disparity, there is a asymmetry, and this is abnormal extension. Then that's abnormal. That shows that there is abnormal tone in that tendon which goes from the great toe. Arching on the back, there are diseases where the child, whenever the child is stimulated, the child is crying or something, child will totally become an arch like, a bow like, opisthotonus. That the medical term is opisthotonus. So arching on the back is abnormal. Some specific postures is adducted thigh, flexed knee, extended knee. like it's completely extended and stiff. Plantar flex toe, equinus deformity. The foot is not like this, but foot is maximum time like this. The other thing is equinovarus deformity, striatal toe. I have showed a posture, and flex toe. Whenever the child keeps the leg, the child has this toes, which are kind of clinging on the ground. That is also abnormal tone of the toe muscles. So, which are the cases? Do we have certain clue that which are the cases we should regularly see and we should actually monitor them very closely? Yes, there are cases which are high risk newborns. Suppose the child is admitted in the NICU and has some stormy course during that neonatal period. That can be hypoglycemia, that can be jaundice, that can be seizures, that can be respiratory distress, or any other non-neurological diseases also. If the child has had NICU stay for some time, and a neonatologist or a pediatrician, whoever says that the child is a high risk neonate, the child needs to be followed at least monthly after that for looking into the general movements, the head size, the tone of the body, so that the doctor has an idea that the child is prone towards cerebral palsy or not. That the thing is post meningitis. The child has had a brain infection, then we should monitor frequently. A head injury or stroke, a ventilated baby, a child who has respiratory issues and is ventilated for longer period, like 10 days, 15 days, and there are chances of hypoxia during that time, then yes, this child needs to be monitored neurologically and closely after that period, after that acute period. Next thing is, if the child has had a major seizure, which is like a prolonged seizure, then yes, the child needs to be monitored. So, what are the associated problems in a child with cerebral palsy? Apart from the movement, apart from the tone of the body, there are other issues which uh, at times are more troubling than the actual tone of the body. So, most common of which is gastrointestinal disorder, in which the child can have constipation. If the child has abnormal tone of the body, even the gut muscles or will be at a stake. Constipation is due to multiple reasons. The child has do not have a proper intake of fibers and fluids, then that can lead to constipation. The gut muscles need not be having a proper peristaltic movement, then there can be constipation. The abnormal tone of the body itself can lead to difficult to passage of the stool. That is again will lead to constipation. Gastroesophageal reflux, that means regurgitation, having repeated vomitings, repeated burping, and child, usually it is after the feed, then that's a common thing in these children. Aspirations, I've not mentioned down here. Aspirations are very common. Aspiration is whenever we take food, some part of it will go kind of towards the lung. So these children have difficulty in coordination here. In our normal individuals, the respiratory system and the gut system is two different pathway, and there is a policeman sitting here. Suppose we take some food here and that's going towards the lung, we'll have a strong cough reflex. But this kind of coordination is not there. This coordination, pharyngeal disc coordination is there, might be there in children with uh, usually the spastic quadriparesis cases. Then in that cases, those children might have micro aspirations. They can have repeated choking. They can have swallowing issues, and then they can have drooling. So these are the multiple gastrointestinal disorders or problems which these children can have. Pain is another very common reason. The first slide which I showed, that excessive irritability. So there are children who have lot of pain because of abnormal tone, and that is why they just keep on crying. They have poor sleep, and if under recognized, it can just lead to a hell lot of problem. The primary changes and the secondary changes in the muscles, joint, and bone can happen. So secondary to dystonia or hip subluxation or constipation, there are multiple reasons which can lead to pain. And since this children, any child of such a age will not be able to explain you. So that's another concern that we should look into. Intellectual disability is just 50%. That means 50% children will not have. It basically depends on the type. Spastic quadriparetic child will have a higher percentage of having intellectual disability. That means poor cognition, poor intelligence, poor problem solving, poor executive functioning. And if a child has spastic diplegia in which the lower limbs are more affected, the child might have absolutely normal intelligence. They can be as good as a normal children. So not all cerebral palsy children will have intellectual disability, or not that they have that minds are not proper. So it's a myth. Parents usually feel that if the child has cerebral palsy, that's the end of the day. No, that's a disorder of tone posture. Cognition doesn't come in all cases. So intelligence is not a part of cerebral palsy in all cases. Epilepsy, that is fits. Even that fits problem is there in less than 50% of the cases. But if the child has spastic quadriparesis, it is most common. In those cases, the child might have certain kind of fits, that is epilepsy. And this epilepsy can be variable. Some have usually occasional, some might have a very severe epilepsy syndromes also. So ultimate outcome of these children will depend on the associated problems. If a child has a kind of cerebral palsy in which the child has multiple associated problems and difficult to treat ones also, then the ultimate outcome will not be as proper as a child who has good prognosis. Visual disorders are there, hearing problems are there in around one third of the patients. So they are common in the they are common following prematurity, and they can have squint, they can have a kind of cortical blindness, they can have searching eyes. So multiple kind of hearing problems can also be there in these children. They can have dysarthria, their normal tone of the jaw muscles and the tongue muscles, they cannot pronounce the word properly. They can have mutism, they can have aphasia. So type of, so variety of impairments can also be there in hearing. So hearing and vision is always screened at the first go when you visit a doctor, apart from the motor problems which the child has. So here the teamwork is very important. So the team consists of multiple people, a physician who can be pediatrician, a pediatric neurologist, a orthopedician, a physical therapist. I would just take this thing off. A physical therapist, a occupational therapist, a speech and language pathologist, a social worker, a psychologist, and an educator. So it's a team of multiple people. In this team, orthotics also play a very important role, because there are times when the child has physical problems and dynamic deformity. We need to put the child on some kind of orthotic devices. So they also have a very important teamwork with us. So what are the goals of the therapy? The first thing is, which I say to my parents, is educating them about the reasonable expectations. That means if a child has spastic diplegia and has a just lower limb weakness, has a very good IQ, is very good intelligence, and the upper limb function is also okay, that's the best kind of cerebral palsy which a child can have, because lower limb problems can be tackled with multiple things. So they have good prognosis, they can go to school, they can almost kind of live a normal life. And if a child has spastic quadriparesis, the head size is very small, has multiple seizures, difficult to control seizures, and along with a lot of feeding issues. So with feeding issues, lot of intake, lot of emaciation and nutritional issues will also come. Failure to thrive will also be there. So multiple issues, repeated hospital admissions, then again that's a sign of bad prognosis. So we should set our expectations during that way. If a child has very severe course, then we should try to make the life easy, like improve the quality of life, rather than targeting that the child will be absolutely normal one day, will be going to school, will be speaking and talking everything. So that kind of expectation if we keep, then uh, we can have difficulties. So a reasonable expectation depending upon the type, the severity, and the associated problems should be set and discussed with the parent, that this is our goal and we want this to be achieved with multiple therapies. So improvement of quality of life is very important, especially in the child who has GMFCS level 4 and 5. Level 3, 1 to 3, we can obviously try to make it in a better level. Like a child who has GMFCS level 3, we can try to make it level 2 or level 1. But 4 and 5, the whole target should be improving the quality of life. The mobility can be a goal, preventing the deformity is a goal, functional ability, improving the functional ability is the goal, ease in the childcare and reducing pain, especially in the child who has GMFCS level 4 and 5. So what is the role of a pediatric neurologist or physician? So who is the leader in this team? See, there is no leader, it's a teamwork. So a physical therapist, a physiotherapist or occupational therapist has a great role, a pediatric neurologist has a great role. After a certain age, a orthopedician has a proper role. So it's a teamwork. Everybody has an important part to play, and that is why for a holistic care, multidisciplinary approach is required. A physician or a pediatric neurologist will identify the problem, will understand the etiology, that why this child has this, and what is the timing of injury. It is because of hypoxia or because of congenital malformation or because of brain infections or jaundice. So what is the ultimate etiology? What is the severity and what are the management plans and ultimate our goal set point. Then what is the priority in treatment of a child who has spastic quadriparesis, has tone problems, has multiple other problems, but has seizures which are actually troubling, has multiple episodes of convulsions in a day? So in that case, the holding or controlling that seizures or convulsions is a main priority. Other things also go hand in hand, but yes, the priority here is controlling the seizures and then following that way. Once your seizures are controlled up to a particular level, then you can go towards the tone thing or the movement, or then you can target your other things. So posturing it, these all are the priority you can set in a one individual case. Then the management of comorbidities, as I've discussed, if the child has feeding issues. Feeding issues can be variable. A child can have just intermittent choking once or twice in a day. Then you can go with your describing about the consistency of the food, the positioning, how to handle the child, or the child has regurgitation, you can add some medicines. But if a child is of GMFCS level 4 and 5 and there is repeated choking, repeated hospital admissions because of aspiration, we advise them peg tube, a tube inside the stomach, so that this feeding pathway is bypassed. So depending upon the level of the child, we advise that what can be the treatment. In some children, drooling is really difficult to go. So at times there are surgeries which can be done for this thing, or you can give some medicine which can be given for drooling. Or in some children, it is not very severe. You can just go for your oromotor therapy, and gradually with the increasing age, this handling of secretions improves. The feeding and nutrition is an important thing. The rehabilitation plan, that is the physical therapy. What is your goal of the therapy and how to go about it is important. Correction of the deformities. So deformities is a later stage, like secondary or tertiary level thing. First thing is abnormal tone and posture. When your muscles are abnormally stiff, then they can go towards a secondary deterioration in affecting the joint or bone. So they can have a particular posture because that joint is involved or that bone remodeling is happening. So before going to that secondary level of problems or tertiary level of problems, initially, if we start early, if the child has just the problem of tone, then it will be easy for a doctor or a person to handle the child. So starting early, here the whole goal is starting early and achieving the goal better. The later we start, the goal or the ultimate prognosis is not going to be good, because secondary changes, the tertiary changes, the bone remodeling must have had happened, and much of the secondary damage would have had happened at that time. So what are the therapeutic modalities available for stiffness? That's the main goal in cerebral palsy. If the child has an abnormal tone, spasticity is the most leading problem which a doctor deals with. There are drugs which I've labeled them here. They can be used for abnormal tone. There are injections available if a child is small, like 2 to 6 years of age, and the child has focal dystonia. If the child has only one part of the body which is very stiff, then in that case, local injections work. Whenever we give tablets, it is usually for the generalized spasticity, because if you increase the dose, the child will be loose. So a fine-tuning management of the drug dosage and the tone of the body is the real key here. And in the focal means a part of the body getting affected. Like if a child only has toe walking, has problems here only in gastrosoleus, we give a focal injection here, a Botox injection, so that it gets released. And then there are options for intrathecal baclofen who has a lot of lower limb issues. If the child has upper limb and the core which is absolutely normal, we can opt for intrathecal baclofen. What are the non-pharmacologic modalities? Physiotherapy, very, very important. As I have told that this is one of the important things which I want to speak, that physical therapy is must and first. Occupational therapy works with your hand functions, basically activities of daily living, your fine motor functions, your feeding, your writing, your expressing, using of hands is mostly the domain of occupational therapist. Use of adaptive equipments and use of orthosis, that is AFO or KFO, any kind of shoes which we say, or braces which we want to make for the children for abnormal postures. Surgical therapy, if the child has had a fixed contracture, then the deformity correction is a surgical thing, or the bone remodeling has happened, then variable surgical therapies or surgical techniques are there. So there you need a pediatric orthopedician. In non-pharmacologic treatment, there are two terms like physiotherapy. There are certain times confusion that whether to go for a physiotherapy, whether to go for occupational therapy, what are they and how are they different. So physiotherapy is mainly for your strength, for your balance, for your gait training, for your mobility. So lot of things like stretching exercises, the range of motion exercises, the resistance building and strength training is a part of physiotherapy. So the mobility balance always comes in the domain of physiotherapy. In occupational therapy, the activities of daily living and fine motor that I've already explained. So there are special approaches for hemiplegic CP that goes on the concept of neural plasticity, that the normal part of the brain or the normal brain neurons, they go adaptive mechanism if the child has certain part of the brain which is abnormal. We said that cerebral palsy is a static encephalopathy. That means the part of the brain which is injured is static. It is not going to decrease, it is not going to increase. But other part of the brain, which is normal, the normal cortical neurons are going to improve and they are going to grow. Like they have multiple branches that the dendritic and synapses are going to form. So that is the concept of neuroplasticity, that if we somehow do that kind of activities, that normal part of the brain can adapt and improve us. So what is bimanual training? Use of both the hands together for multiple tasks. What is constraint induced movement therapy? Suppose the child has hemiparetic CP. That means the child has one part of the body which is affected. Then rather than not using this hand, we want this abnormal or this weak hand to work more, so that it will gain certain power. Because if we don't use this, then we lose this. The hand is going to go in disuse atrophy. So hand is going to be small, the hand is going to be thin. If we want to use that hand particularly, we want to make this hand work forcefully. And for this, we want to tie the normal hand and this weak hand, we are trying to do some therapy with that. So that is called constraint induced movement therapy, very useful for hemiplegic CP. Even the researchers have said that this is an important modality, and newer modalities are coming on this, like the virtual reality therapy, and nowadays magnetic therapy is also coming over this. So what is the final prognosis in a child who has monoplegia, like one part of the body only affected? Then ambulation potential is up to 100%. Hemiplegia, usually 90 to 100% will walk. So, and in ataxia, they walk with a discoordination. Basically, the coordination problem will be there, the balancing issues will be there, frequent falls might be there, but yes, they might walk 90 to 100% of the time. In diplegia means the leg is getting affected more, the lower limbs are getting affected. So in that, 85 to 90% will be able to walk at a certain age. That age, I'm not defining here, but depending upon the severity, they will be able to walk in most of the cases. Faster quadriplegia has a grim prognosis. If the child has level 4 or 5, then the child might not walk at all. And if the child has lesser degree of hypertonia or functional ability, a better functional ability, he will be able to walk. So what about the motor function? So in overall, we say not kind of very rigid thing, but if a child is able to sit independently by the age of 2 years, child will be able to walk. So that's how we look. If the child is able to sit independently by 3 to 4 years, then only 50% will be able to walk independently. The child has had persistence of primitive reactions. That means their primitive reflexes that is there beyond 2 years, then the prognosis is very poor to attain any kind of milestone. If the child has absence of any postural reactions, these are the normal reactions which develop after the child attains a certain age, then again the prognosis is poor. So finally, I would say that all kids need a little help, a little hope, and somebody who believes in them. It's not that this is a dead end diagnosis, and we should actually try to have a little hope and try to help these children for the best they can achieve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was really very informational for all of us.
Did I finish it fast or what? No, it's on time only.
Yeah.
I just prepared the basic slides so that to give a basic idea. I told at the initial go only that this is not a very advanced kind of thing, but this is overall giving an information that what is cerebral palsy and how other things are very important, like associated problems are very important, and how do we deal with them. It is not just about the tone and the posture. It is about the other things in combination with it.
Yeah, absolutely. If someone has any questions, you can raise your hand or you can message us in the chat box.
You can raise your hand or you can drop your question in the chat box.
Was I not audible? Actually, one or two messages I could see sound is not coming. Is it like, was it like that? Gargi, were you able to?
There was some problem with network for a
Yeah, for
moment
a
or
while.
two.
Yeah.
Okay, okay,
It was okay. Yeah.
okay.
Ma'am, we'll wait for a few minutes for any
Fine,
questions.
fine, no issue.
Yeah.
So we have one question. Uh, or do all kids have good IQ?
No, I told at the my presentation also. See, I should stop share. That about 50% will have a intellectual disability. Intellectual disability means having a low intelligence, and that depends on the type of the cerebral palsy. If the child has spastic quadriparesis and has a very small head circumference, then that child is liable to have a poor IQ. But if the child has hemiparesis, usually hemiparetic CP, or the child who has spastic diplegia has good kind of IQ. They can go to school, they can learn, they can have at par intelligence compared to other children. So not all will have poor IQ, not all will have a normal IQ. That's about a 50% cases.
Jalaj, can we unmute Dr. Samar?
Yeah, definitely. Dr. Samath, you can ask your question now.
Good afternoon, Doctor. Thank you for such a lucid and informative presentation. In my OPD, generally, like 5 in 100 patients are with CP, and what I figured out is that it is a big disease burden on the society. So my question is regarding, collaboration with NGOs and empowerment offered by Ministry of Social Justice for such cases. So, ma'am, is there any center at your place? Because at here in Kanpur, there is one. So we send them for physiotherapy and regular checkups, and vocational rehabilitation is also there. Depending on the severity, they get the guidance. And as for seizures, we are doing the medical management. But what about at your place?
No, so see, where I work is a private setup, so we cannot make a disability certificate, which is very legal. So one thing which is important in these cases is getting a disability certificate, I must say, to have some kind of concessions or some kind of extra things. So
Yes.
that we should all strive for. The other thing is getting these children in a normal schooling. I have seen a lot of schools refusing just because the child has some kind of disability. See, all children will not have a poor IQ. There are children who
Yes.
have very good intelligence. So I
Yes.
have one patient who has hemiplegic CP, and she's pretty good. She's able to recite poems. She's able to speak story and all. So IQ will be somewhere around 70 to 80. But yes, but these children are trainable and educable. There are schools who are refusing admissions to them. So
Right.
that is there. These are the cases which I really get a pain kind of thing. So schooling and a disability certificate. I think these are the two things which we all try to make our centers better.
I think, ma'am, all academies will raise the level of awareness and would like to issue addresses and contacts of such centers so that clinicians also find it easy to refer these patients because
Right.
it's ongoing problem. Yeah. Thank you so much.
So we have something in chat.
We have one more question
Yeah.
in the chat. From Bir Singh, he is asking that his grandson is suffering from verbal palsy. His age is 14 years. And if you can
24
tell
years.
something about that.
So 24 years, what I can read from the chat box is
No, he has written it
again
like
14 years.
after like
14 years. Yes.
14 years. Yeah.
So 14 years. So verbal palsy is maybe cerebral palsy only, they mean to say. So cerebral palsy needs, first thing is an assessment that what is the type, what is the severity, and what is the ultimate goal. So depending upon the problems which can be handled at that age, we can give any treatment. So it is not like a 14-year-old child having cerebral palsy, this kind of treatment can be given. If there are 4 children who have cerebral palsy of the same age, the treatment will be different in all the 4 children. Even the therapist, I think all the therapists who are there in the forum with me, they will be able to understand that depending upon each individual child, they have proper kind of management. Not all exercises are unanimous for all the children at a particular age. So it depends on one particular child. So treatment is tailor made. It is not same for all. Gargi, shall I take up the questions, or I can read something in chat box?
Yeah.
So next, Indira wants to ask that my else child's spastic quadriplegia 10 years maybe, 10 years or 10 months, I don't know. No neck holding till now. What can we do to him? And he's on anti-seizure medication or anti-epileptic drugs due to aspiration. So again, Indira, we want to see the child that it's first thing is it is 10 month or 10 year. If it is 10 month, no neck holding, yes, we can do something. Controlling the seizures will be a good thing, because if we control the seizures, then development will happen with your therapies. So one thing which is good in cerebral palsy is, if you do nothing, then also improvement is going to happen, because it is a static encephalopathy. With increasing age, definitely improvement will happen, but to what extent, that all depends upon each individual child. So controlling seizures, managing the tone with your therapy, physical therapy, that is physiotherapy and occupational therapy, is must in every child.
We
So,
have one more.
yeah.
Yeah. So we have one more question from Gaurav Singla. He's asking that how much Botox treatment is useful.
How much Botox treatment? Okay. See, Botox, when we see that this child is a candidate for Botox therapy, we always give them a guidance that this is fine. And that all depends that which muscle groups are affected. Suppose we want to give only in the upper limb. If the child is hemiparesis and has some kind of hand postures, we want to give only in small muscles of the hand, then the units will be different. So 1 unit or 2 unit per side. And depending upon the abnormal tone and the target which the doctor wants to achieve, that will decide that what is the unit required. So on an average, if the child is 4 to 5 years of age, 100 to 200 units, depending upon multiple sides and the severity of the tone, is will be able to decide that what is the dose we want to give.
Also, a participant has raised their hand, ma'am, Pratibha. I will be unmuting her now so that
Sure.
she can ask her question.
So till that time, Indira has cleared that he's a 10-year-old child, and can I give Botox now? Yes, Botox can be given, but we need to say that for what reason. If the child is not able to hold head at the age of 10 years, then giving Botox only in the limbs will not work. See, nature has a rule. Holding the head, sitting, standing, and walking. This is the cycle which goes that first the child will be able to hold the head, sitting, and then standing and walking. It will not happen that the child is not holding the neck and one day he will start suddenly walking. So this process will start. If it starts at 10 years, it's fine. So giving a Botox for making the child ambulating is not a good thing, Indira, in this case. Maybe we can give Botox to relax the adductor muscles so that you can nurse the child better. For the toiletry needs and for the other needs, we can just make a little relaxed the adductor muscles so that you can nurse the child well. That should be the target in that case. And the dosage will depend. The Botox, if you want to release the spasticity for making the child walk, the dose is different. And if you want to just release the muscle a little, for nursing and improving the care of the child, then the dose will be different. Yeah, I'll answer.
Parvati, you can ask your question.
पार्वती जी क्वेश्चन पूछिए.
हाँ मैम, मेरे बच्चे का एज 6+ है. हाँ हेलो.
हाँ हाँ मैं सुन रही हूँ, आप बताइए.
हाँ मैम, मेरे बच्चे का एज 6+ है. वो मेडिसिन चलने के बाद दिन में मैम उसका कन्वल्सन बहुत हो रहा है. दिन में 6-7 बार, उसके अधिक बार भी हो रहा है. मैम प्लीज हेल्प. हाँ मैम.
जो ये कन्वल्शन बहुत बार हो रहा है, तो
हाँ मैम,
को एक बार देखना पड़ेगा कि किस वजह से हो रहा है. बेसिकली ब्रेन
हाँ
का
मैम.
एमआरआई, किस जगह का एमआरआई में प्रॉब्लम है, एक साइड का झटका है या पूरी बॉडी का झटका है, और
हाँ
ईईजी
मैम.
में कितना सीजर बर्डन है. जब हम ब्रेन का वो तार वाला जांच करते हैं, उसमें
हाँ
हमें
मैम.
पता लगता है कि कितना सिवियर एपिलेप्सी है.
ओके मैम.
किसी बच्चे में ऐसा होता है कि दवाई से अच्छे से कंट्रोल आ जाता है, और किसी बच्चे में, जो कि जांच हमें गाइडेंस देगा, कई बार सीजर कंट्रोल सिर्फ 50-60% ही होता है, बट सीजर
ओके मैम.
आ सकता है डिपेंडिंग अपॉन कि एमआरआई में कितना डैमेज है. दूसरा ईजी अपने को क्या बताता है.
ओके मैम।
पर बच्चे को देख के ही गाइडेंस दे सकते हैं ऐसे।
मैम मैम हम लोग तो कोलकाता में रहते हैं मैम, आपका क्लिनिक कहाँ पर है मैम?
ये तो दिल्ली में है, तो कलकत्ता में भी बहुत सारे पीडियाट्रिक न्यूरोलॉजिस्ट आपको मिल जाएंगे जो
ओके मैम।
लोकल या कोई पीडियाट्रिशियन होंगे वो आपको गाइड कर देंगे। तो एक बार डॉक्टर से जरूर दिखाइए, क्योंकि सीजर इतना तो अच्छी बात नहीं है। सीजर
मैम
कंट्रोल
दिन में बहुत बार हो रहा है, बहुत एक अलग अलग तरह का सीजर हो रहा है बच्चे का।
हाँ, तो ये आपको दिखाना जरूरी है, ये आपको लोकल वहाँ पे किसी को दिखाना होगा। और कभी आप दिल्ली आए तो जरूर आ जाएं, मैं देख लूंगी उसको।
ठीक है मैम, ठीक है, ओके मैम, थैंक यू।
Joyce is asking whether MRI is mandatory.
No.
We are hearing different opinions across the doctors.
Yeah, see, MRI is not necessary for diagnosis. अगर आपको सेरेब्रल पाल्सी का डायग्नोसिस बनाना है, दैट इज डिपेंडिंग अपॉन द मूवमेंट टोन एंड यू हैव अ प्रॉपर हिस्ट्री कि उसको कोई ब्रेन में इंजरी हुई है, एनी काइंड ऑफ इंजरी, यू कैन मेक अ ओवरऑल क्लिनिकल डायग्नोसिस ऑफ सेरेब्रल पाल्सी। MRI is done for 2-3 reasons. One thing is the extent of injury, कि ब्रेन में इंजरी कितना ज्यादा है कितना कम है। तो जो अल्टीमेट प्रोग्नोसिस हम लोग डिसाइड करते हैं कि ये बच्चा चल पाएगा नहीं चल पाएगा, इसको सीजर्स होंगे या क्या एसोसिएटेड प्रॉब्लम्स होंगे, उसके लिए एक तो MRI किया जाता है। सो प्रोग्नोसिस and etiology, these are the two very important factors in cerebral palsy for overall treatment and management that we want to know. It is not just MRI, even at cases CT can also say MRI is obviously better compared to CT, but MRI से अपने को etiology मतलब क्या कारण है और अल्टीमेट प्रोग्नोसिस क्या होगा उसका आइडिया लगता है। डायग्नोसिस बनाने के लिए या मैनेजमेंट के लिए पर से जरूरत नहीं है। सेरेब्रल पॉल्सी का मैनेजमेंट टोन का होता है, पोस्चर का होता है, वो मेडिकल मैनेजमेंट होता है। जैसे अगर अकड़न कहीं की है, कहाँ की है, किस टाइप की अकड़न है, उसके दवाई दिया जाएगा, कैसे सीजर्स हैं उस टाइप से हम दवाई दे सकते हैं। तो इसीलिए जरूरी नहीं है हर केसेस में, बट हाँ, वी एंड अप डूइंग इन ऑल केसेस। इनफैक्ट मेरे पास जो बच्चे आते हैं अल्टीमेटली या तो सीटी या MRI उनका कभी ना कभी होता है, इफ नॉट एट फर्स्ट गो, बट हो सकता है कुछ टाइम के बाद। जो छोटे बच्चे होते हैं, लेस देन 1 ईयर के बच्चे होते हैं, उनको यूजुअली हम MRI नहीं एडवाइस करते हैं अगर क्लियर कट हिस्ट्री है और बच्चे में दिख रहा है कि दिस इज अ चाइल्ड ऑफ सेरेब्रल पाल्सी, बिकॉज क्योंकि सिडेट करना पड़ता है उनको। सिडेट करने का जो रिस्क है वी डोंट वांट टू टेक एट दैट टाइम, एंड ब्रेन का ग्रोथ भी प्रॉपर नहीं हुआ रहता है। सो वी कैन पोस्टपोन टिल सर्टन एज, ये इस टाइम के बाद में हम MRI करवा के देखेंगे कि अल्टीमेटली बच्चा कैसा रहेगा।
Indra is asking, till now her child is not able to hold his neck. So if she can see any improvement in that.
Okay, see, 10-year-old child, if the child is not able to hold neck, it is very difficult. So that the child will achieve a mobility, that child will be able to sit or walk, वो चीज होना मुश्किल होगा। बट क्योंकि वो GMFCS लेवल 5 का लगता है मुझे, जितना सुन पाई हूँ कि हेड भी होल्डिंग नहीं है उसको। सो इन दैट केस उसका क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ इंप्रूव करने के लिए अगर टोन बहुत ज्यादा है तो कुछ बोटॉक्स लगा के या कुछ मेडिसिन देके टोन थोड़ा कम कर सकते हैं, ताकि उनका नर्सिंग और उनका केयर बेटर हो सके। सो टू इम्प्रूविंग द क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ विल बी द अल्टीमेट टारगेट इन दैट केस।
Thank you so much, ma'am. The webinar was very insightful for all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for participating.
Yeah, ma'am, we would like to, have some words from you as it's the Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month. So, ma'am, would you like to say something?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I want to say all my parents here that all the parents of the children here, that first thing is don't lose hope. If we lose hope, then the battle is unfought. So we should have some kind of hope and we should have a realistic goal. What I feel in my practice over so many years is that at times वो एक ही चीज पूछते हैं मुझे आके कि क्या ये ठीक हो जाएगा, बट ये जो ठीक हो जाएगा परिभाषा है वो हर बच्चे के लिए दूसरा दूसरा होता है। सो बेटर हो जाएगा इज वन थिंग विच आई से, यस बेटर तो डेफिनेटली हो जाएगा, जिस भी वो स्टेज में है कुछ करके उसको बेटर किया जा सकता है, बट ठीक हो जाएगा वो बोलना मुश्किल है। अल्टीमेट टारगेट बच्चे का होता है कि बच्चा एक इंडिपेंडेंट जिंदगी जिए, दैट इज एक्टिविटी ऑफ जो डेली लिविंग है, उसका घर का काम है, खुद का काम है, खुद का देखभाल है, वो काम बच्चा कर पाए। सो दैट इज द फर्स्ट एंड फॉरमोस्ट टारगेट। अगर बच्चे का इतना कैपेबिलिटी है कि वो स्कूल भी जाएगा, पढ़ेगा भी, बाकी सारे काम भी करेगा, एंड देन वी कैन ऑब्वियसली टेल दैट। सो बच्चे का जो बेस्ट वर्जन है वो उसको बनाने का कोशिश करना है, होप नहीं लूज करना है। और दूसरा चीज है कि मैडम कोई दवाई दे दीजिए जिससे ये ठीक हो जाए। सो दैट इज वन थिंग विच आई रियली गेट बग्ड ऑफ, कि मेडिसिन से ठीक नहीं होता। जो हम मेडिसिन में देते हैं, मेडिकल मैनेजमेंट करते हैं फॉर द टोन एंड मूवमेंट एंड पोस्चर, उसका रोल इतना ही है कि फिजियोथेरेपी में आपको हेल्प करेगा। सी अल्टीमेट थेरेपी इज फिजिकल थेरेपी। आपका जो फिजियोथेरेपी है या ऑक्यूपेशनल थेरेपी है, मेडिसिन उस चीजों को बेटर कर सकता है, उसको इम्प्रूव बिल्कुल नॉर्मल नहीं कर सकता। किसी एज पे जब थेरेपी आप रेगुलर कराएंगे तो मेडिसिन का जरूरत नहीं होता, फाइनली वी विथड्रॉ इट। सो देयर इज नो पर से मेडिसिन फॉर सेरेब्रल पॉल्सी, इट इज द फिजिकल थेरेपी विच विल गिव अ लॉन्ग टर्म एंड अ परमानेंट सोल्यूशन फॉर अ पर्टिकुलर चाइल्ड। और एक बात मैं बताना चाहूंगी, जितने भी हमारे पेरेंट्स हैं यहाँ पे, वो ये कि जिस बच्चे का फिजिकल थेरेपी अच्छा होता है, मसल का स्ट्रेंथ अच्छा होता है, उसको फाइनली जब हम सर्जरी प्लान करते हैं, देखो एक स्टेज पे आने के बाद बहुत बच्चों को सर्जरी की जरूरत होती है, जो एक पीडियाट्रिक ऑर्थोपेडिशियन करता है। जब हम सर्जरी करेंगे और उसका आउटकम कैसे होगा, जैसे मैं सर्जरी करवा तो लूं, मैंने इतने पैसे अरेंज कर लिए हैं और मैं सर्जरी करवा लूंगा, बट क्या मेरा बच्चा चल पाएगा, वो भी डिपेंड करता है कि उसके मसल का कितना स्ट्रेंथ है। अगर 2 बच्चे हैं जिसमें एक बच्चे ने बहुत अच्छे से एक्सरसाइज की, दोनों का सेम लेवल का डिसेबिलिटी है, एक बच्चा तो सर्जरी के बाद चलने लगा है बट दूसरा बच्चा नहीं चल पा रहा है, वो इसीलिए कि उसके बच्चे की मसल की स्ट्रेंथ अच्छी है। सो रेगुलर फिजिकल थेरेपी करते रहने का बहुत फायदा है। मेडिसिन कम हो सकती है, सर्जरी के अच्छे रिजल्ट हो सकते हैं। सो फाइनल आउटकम इज फिजिकल थेरेपी। आपका टाइम, मनी, पैसा, दिमाग सब कुछ फिजिकल थेरेपी और ऑक्यूपेशनल थेरेपी में लगाएं। डॉक्टर्स जैसे फिजिशियन है, पीडियाट्रिक न्यूरोलॉजिस्ट हैं, उनसे एसोसिएटेड प्रॉब्लम्स की और ओवरऑल होलिस्टिक केयर की बात करें डॉक्टर से, और ये चीज इंपॉर्टेंट है। तो डॉक्टर का रोल उतना ही है कि एक ओवरऑल बच्चे को देखेगा टोटल ग्लोबली, और बाकी जो आपके थेरेपिस्ट है उनका बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंट एक काइंड ऑफ ना पिलर हैं वो लोग इन बच्चों के लिए।
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. Ma'am, we are very glad and we'll wait for the next session also.
थैंक यू, थैंक
Yeah.
यू।
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Gargi. Thank you, everyone.